Okay, today we are going to be making something called a coil pot. So you guys are going to get clay today. Remember that clay comes from the ground. It is made of decomposed rock, so very, very old rock mixed with water, rock that's breaking down. And the cool thing about clay is that we heat it or fire it in the kiln and it will become hard permanently. So the thing that you make today, the coil pot that you make today, like this one, will become permanently hard, almost like glass when we're finished with it. This is one that's been fired but not painted. The first thing I'm going to do is tear a piece of my clay off of the big brick, and I'm going to squish it in my hands a couple of times, and then I'm going to roll it into a circle shape. Does not have to be perfect, just a pretty good sized circle. Once you have a pretty good circle, you are going to smush it flat. Now, you do not need to beat on the table to do this part, just push it flat. This is going to be the bottom of your coil pot. Write your name with a pencil and then flip over. You want your name on the bottom. So there's my name. Flip it over. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start building walls by making coils. So a coil, if you've ever made a Play-Doh snake, you've made a coil. So what you're going to do is I squeeze it first to kind of make a long shape of clay. Then I'm going to start rolling it in between my hands. This starts to get it round. And then I roll with my hands wide. If you have just one hand, this part's going to get thin and this is not. So you want to roll slowly with your hands, with your fingers wide. That way you can make a long coil. And one of the problems that happens a lot of times is it'll start to get like oval shaped or kind of flatten out a little bit, and it's not going to want to roll very well with you. So don't push down hard, because when you push down hard it flattens it out and then it makes it more difficult. I'm barely pushing down, I'm just kind of rolling it towards me softly, and it will grow. Then what we're going to do is we are going to be putting it on here like so, and we'll tear off the extra. But first we have to do something called scoring and slipping. So we're going to use a toothbrush with some water. We're just going to kind of scratch our clay. You want to make some little lines. You're trying to give it a texture. Then we're going to add some water. Really scratch it up good, because that is what makes clay stick together. If you put two pieces of clay together, they're going to be sticky today because they're wet, and it's going to look like it's going to stay. When it dries out in the kiln, those two pieces will just fall apart. There's nothing really holding it there. So what we're doing is we're making a scratchy texture on one side and a scratchy texture on the other side. That way when we stick it together, it's tight, almost like Velcro for clay. It holds it together. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my coil, put it on here, press down, and then this piece I am going to pinch off, and I smooth the seam right there so you don't see it. You want to be careful about getting your coils too thin. If they're too thin, they're not going to be strong enough to hold the next wall. I usually like for my coils to be, I don't know, about the size of my pinky finger. See, this one's a lot skinnier, so it might not be strong enough. So I don't want a whole lot that are teeny tiny like that, or your pot will start to get wiggly. So I'm going to do another one. When I'm starting to do this toothbrush part and the walls are getting a little taller, you want to be careful. I'm kind of pinching right here against the wall so that it supports it, so that I'm not tearing apart my clay project by doing that. Add my next coil. And it's up to you how you want your pot to be shaped, if you keep doing the same size coils every time, it'll stay straight, but if you start making the coils smaller, it could go in and be skinnier at the top, or if you make them bigger, it will flare out and be wider at the top. Next week we're going to paint these, or next time you see these, we're going to paint these pots, so the next time you get them, they will be fired, so they'll be hard like this one, and then we'll go back with glaze. Glaze is a glass that you can paint onto your pot, and it comes out very shiny once it's been fired. So these are some examples of glazed projects. So it's a glassy, bright paint once it's done. So we'll be decorating with that. But if you do want any decorations with the clay, if you have any extra pieces, you can kind of smush them up and attach them by making a shape if you would like. That's something we tried in the past. So I'm making a little ball just like I did to begin with, and I flattened it out, smooth it. Now I'm going to draw a heart shape. You could do a star, you could do a letter. I'm going to cut with my clay knife, cut my shape out. I'm going to smooth my edges. And then I'm going to take my toothbrush tool, and I'm going to scratch and slip on my pot a little bit right here. So I'm scoring, slipping. Do the same thing on my little heart. Careful not to smush it or change its shape. And then I can stick this on the front, so that way you get a little design if you want one. And then I could even go in with my pencil and give it a pattern, like dots, or I could put my initials or something like that. So there is my coil pot.